And we can trace the origin. The origin is that the soul, the living entity, spiritual being, Atma, is a person, has a spiritual form, and naturally has desire for loving relationship. The supreme lovable object is Sri Krishna. Krishna is the lovable, the object of love. But sometimes living entities stray away from Krishna with their free will and their choice, and they may choose to stay in the material world. The material world is for them if they wish. And in the material world, then things come under a different control instead of under love and purity and devotion. Then instead of love, which is prema, that love becomes transformed into kama, lust. Lust is a perverted form of love. Love is meant for Krishna, between God and the living entity. But under the mode of passion, kamesha, krodesha, rajaguna samudbhavaha, mahashano, mahapatma, vidyenam, ihaviranam. Then that pure love becomes transformed into lust. And that's the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. This world means the material world. It's like water. When it comes from the sky, from the clouds, it's pure. But when it hits the ground and it gets muddy, and the more it stays in the ground, it mixes with so many impure things. The material world is full of impure things. And we can see that Kali Yuga, we're living now in the fourth age. We know the four ages: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And the age of Kali is the age of degradation the most. And we're only 5,000 years in to the age of Kali. There's another 427,000 years to go. And it gets worse. We've seen in our own lifetimes how things have degraded. And you'll see in your lifetimes things degrade further until it's the Bhagavatam forecasts that as Kali Yuga continues, lifespan will diminish more and more until the time near the later on. And if a man is 25 years old, he'll be considered a grand old man. And the eating, there'll be no more plants and vegetables and grains and fruits. If there are any fruits, they'll be simply skin and pit. And the eating process will be, there won't even be animals to eat, so it'll be man eat man. It very degraded. So, in one sense, no one can be blamed too much for being swept away by the material waves. Material waves are pounding us, controlling us. But still, there's a process called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is recommended in Bhagavad Gita. Bhaktyamam avijanati yavanyasyasvata. As the process for knowing the absolute truth, getting free from this material entanglement. If we want to get free from the material entanglement, if we want to get free from birth, death, old age, and disease, then we have to become free from material desires, of which lust is the king. So that's a little background of how this lust is. It's coming from the word passion. Passion means we want to enjoy ourselves as the direct enjoyer instead of enjoying through service to Krishna. It's something like the hand. The hand is meant to serve the body, to take the banana and give it to the stomach. The stomach enjoys the banana and distributes the nourishment throughout the whole body. But when the hand inordinately thinks, oh, why should I give the food to the stomach? I'll eat it myself. Makes a mess. Doesn't get any nourishment, no taste, nothing, just ruins it. So that's what material desires do, or passion does, or lust does. It ruins the opportunity to give something nice to Krishna. So, we've prepared, we have a book, we have that book, we can hold it up to the bringing. Yes, it's there if you'd like to take a look. This is our best-selling book, believe it or not. Oh, it's here. And surprisingly, it's the best-selling book that we have because in the age of Kali, this is not very, it's not even allowed. You're not allowed to talk about such things. It's almost taboo. I was speaking with one psychiatrist before I was writing the book. I was saying, why don't you write it with me? It'll give it more validity if a psychiatrist also. He says, if I put my name to do with this book, I'll be barred from my profession. He wasn't joking. He would lose his position. Because to propagate the value of celibacy and brahmacharya in this age, not acceptable by mainstream society. But anyway, luckily Lord Chaitanya's, he likes to, he organized the first civil disobedience protest to the Qazi when this is before Gandhi. When the Qazi, the Muslim magistrate, he broke the mridanga, kirtan. He said no more kirtan in Navadvip. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay. He organized 100,000 people. That night they had a big kirtan. They came to his house. He said so. And he changed his mind. They had a talk. So that's civil disobedience. And this Krishna conscious movement is like that. So we've prepared some few points. We'll discuss them briefly, kind of go through to give you an overview. And then afterwards, and if you have any questions, we can discuss. Okay? So, it's not that go back, I'll tell you when to go. I'll say switch, okay? And you'll know that's the cue. Or maybe I should say something more transcendental like Haribol. We'll try that. It's not always been this way throughout the world. Of course, in India we know brahmacharya has been strong. It's becoming weaker now, but in India brahmacharya has been very strong. Even now, especially South India is strong. There's ashrams with gurukulas and brahmacharis. Very nice, they're trained in that way. And the value of celibacy and brahmacharya was also taught and understood by previous scientists and leaders like Hippocrates. Hippocrates lived, this is about 2,500 years ago. And he's considered the father of medicine. In fact, there's the Hippocratic Oath. Any doctors here? Doctors have to, at least they used to. When I was young, they had to take a Hippocratic Oath. That meant that they would always try to do the best for the patient. They would do their best to. Then the ethics, the morality was that they're to help, try to cure and do the best. So he's very famous. The father of medicine. And someone I was going to ask who can read clearly and loudly in English? You? Okay. Well, to save my voice a little, as you can see my voice is a little weak, I'm going to ask, sometimes you can read that, starting from, I'll just go from the top.
Hippocrates, 473-60 before Christ, is considered the greatest physician of antiquity and is regarded as the father of medicine and medical ethics. He was born on the Aegean island of Kos in Greece and died in Larissa, Greece. Hippocrates traveled widely. His name is associated with the Hippocratic Oath. Approximately 70 works are ascribed to him in the Hippocratic collection. He left many texts on brain surgery, seizures, spasm, epilepsy, etc. He wrote Sacred Disease, a treatise on epilepsy, which he believed to be caused by insufficient hair. It was thought to be carried by the veins to the brain and limbs.
Rainbow. Okay. These are quotes from Hippocrates.
Pavus dorsalis, syphilis, proceeds from the spinal cord. It is frequently met with among newly married people and labor colonies. Hippocrates believed that there was a coordination between the testicular fluid and the nervous system, brain, and spinal cord.
This is in other words, the brain, the spinal cord, and the nervous system connected to the testicular fluid. In other words, the vital fluid of the body is meant to nourish and to lubricate and to provide all kinds of functions in the running of the body, and especially the nervous system and the brain. This will be discussed more when we get to the Vedic, the Ayurvedic. Why don't we go on and we'll discuss that in the Ayurvedic. Good. That was it. That was the one I want to go back on.
Yes,
Go back the other way.
reverse.
Wow. Oh, there we go. Start over again. Next. Next one. Back there. Okay. Go. Okay. So in the Ayurvedic system, it's explained that the body has 7 dhatus. The skin and the chyle and the blood and then the muscles and then there's bones and marrow, and ultimately the 7th one is shukra. Shukra means the seminal fluid, the vital force, and it is, according to Aristotle, who was a great Western thinker. You can read that?
Aristotle, 484, 322 before Christ, more than any other thinker, determined the orientation and the content of Western intellectual history. Born in Stagirus, Macedonia, Greece, and died in Chalcis, Euboea, Greece. His father was Nicomachus, a medical doctor, and his mother was named Pistis.
Next.
Aristotle considered blood transformed by heat. Thus, the appearance of male semen is a result of an infusion of heat that concentrates the potency of the blood and changes its appearance. Aristotle described semen as the excretion from the ultimate food, or to put it more clearly, as the most perfected components of our foods.
This is exactly Vedic. It's the same conclusion. That food comes in and gradually it is broken down to blood and tissues and muscles and what have you. And ultimately, when it's reached its most refined state, it's the sukha. And sukha is vital for nourishing the brain. It's the brain. It gives the brain its subtle nourishment. They've done studies, these scientists, and they found that when those who partake waste their vital fluid, the brain tissues and the nerve endings, they don't get nourished, they dry up, and then there's schizophrenia, dementia, so many other problems, loss of this vital fluid. This was known. How did they know this? How did Aristotle know? Aristotle was from a very wealthy family, as many of these scientists and thinkers were from Greece. And where did they get their knowledge? They went to India. It's documented. They went to India and they studied with the pundits in India. So it's not surprising that they knew these things because they got it from the source. India is the cradle of civilization. Even Einstein said that we owe a lot to India because India taught us how to count, without which no worthwhile endeavor could be made. So he was very appreciative of the Indian culture. So it's not surprising that the West also understood the importance of chastity and brahmacharya, celibacy. It was even part of the religious culture, as you know, and part of moral principles. So, because of India, let's read about Tissot. You've heard of.
Samuel Auguste André David Tissot, 1728 to 1700.
And now we're dealing with, that was 2,000 years ago, now we've come closer to the modern.
Distinguished Swiss professor of medicine and one of the founders of rational medicine. He practiced in the Swiss city of Lausanne. In his most significant book on the traits of epilepsy, published in 1770, he describes the symptomatology of nearly every form of epileptic seizures and expresses his views on the pathogenesis, course, and prognosis of epilepsy. The book remains one of the cornerstones of modern epileptology. He also was renowned for another popular book published in 1761. He furthered the understanding of sanitary principles and dietetics. He is also credited with establishing systematic evaluation of treatments and correlations of symptoms through post-mortem.
Next.
Tissot believes that orgasms are also sometimes accompanied by a convulsive action, and such violent palpitations are the result of an overstimulation of the nervous system. Tissot theorized that the extreme activity of the nerves during orgasm is necessarily followed by a depression of the same nerves, and the bipolar nature of this mechanism causes permanent derangement if it occurs too frequently.
In other words, he, and not only him, but you'll see many of the other great fathers of medicine, pointed out that there is a very striking similarity in the functions of epileptic seizure and the orgasm of sex indulgence. And it's not quite as romantic as it's it out to be. And from the point of view of the bodily, the well-being of the body, what to speak of the brain, it's detrimental. And so where did we get this idea? The Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana states that the pleasure that is derived from the act of sexual intercourse, not just in humans, in every species. There's some pleasure, it's amazing. 8,400,000 species, and all of them have their own unique way of getting pleasure. Why is that? The Bhagavatam says it's the arrangement of the Lord so that there's some pleasure coating on this indulgence to offset the troubles of begetting. Otherwise, no one would beget. If there wasn't some pleasure, well, that's too much work, taking care of this, going through pregnancy and producing the children. So the Lord made some pleasure there. But the living entities in the material world, at least the humans, try to exploit that pleasure. The animals and the lower species, they cannot exploit it because they're not given that freedom. They even have seasons. They're put in seasons, all right, during this season, you become excited by sex desire, and then that's the time that is good for fertility, for reproduction. That's the system. Other times, they're not interested. But humans, because humans have higher intelligence, but that higher intelligence can also be used for lower things, for exploiting things. Just like, for example, if a person is just ordinarily intelligent, he may be a pickpocket. If he becomes corrupt, then you think, oh, a pickpocket. But if he's very intelligent, he may figure out how to crack the computer system for the whole government treasury system. He can really cause problems. So his greater intelligence can also be used to create greater harm. And that's what happens with the humans. They've been given this system, this pleasure, and which is meant for reproduction. But they take advantage of it and think, well, we'll take the pleasure and leave behind the part that we don't want. The pregnancy and raising the child, so we'll eliminate that part and just take. So that, of course we can do that, but that's against nature, that's against God. And the result is not very favorable for the individual or collectively. It creates a degradation in society. Okay, next. Okay, next. Read that.
Tiso said the wealthy, urban, and especially the intelligentsia with their lives of luxury and idleness,
Yeah.
are prone to find their boredom in a search for stimulation, a search that leads them to practices opposed to the usage of nature, including onanism. Once the practice begins, it becomes an addiction leading to enervation and death.
Yeah, this practice has become very widespread all over the world, and it's very unfortunate because when vital fluid is wasted in youth, it's especially weakening to the organism, to the living being, to the body. Even there's a correlation between this, raising animals, just like racehorses. Those who raise racehorses, they know, don't let the racehorse have connection. They keep them celibate if they want it to run properly, to have the greatest strength. Same thing with plants. If it fructifies too soon, it loses strength. So the Vedic system is that man should practice celibacy till he's 25 or something like that. The body is fully developed and strong. Then when he produces, when he has union, then he'll be able to produce good, strong children. But since that's not being practiced, we find many anomalies, weakens the system, and we find a lot of, like here in the West, you may have noticed because you're mostly from India, so you can compare that the mental diseases in the West are quite more widespread. Lots of depression, lots of bipolar, and this is at least in part due to these unnatural practices. Okay, continue.
Tissot said that the increase in blood flow to the brain during orgasm also oppresses the nerves, making the individual more susceptible to apoplexy, a sudden loss of consciousness, resulting when the rupture of occlusion of a blood vessel leads to oxygen lack in the brain, paralysis, epilepsy, insanity, and other nervous disorders.
This is stroke, huh? When there's some problem in the brain, so there's more. We find a lot of strokes. The sukra, or the semen, is in males and females, not just males, both. And when it's lost, it draws, when it comes out of the body, it draws from all the cells in the body. So it causes a complete overall weakening of the system, and especially the brain, because as we'll be coming up here, one of these scientists made a very astute, you may go on to the next one, we'll see if we get it. He made an astute observation. You can keep going because we'll stop on this one for a minute. But the astute observation was that the brain and the genital are fierce competitors for the shukra, for the semen. Because the genital wants to use it for sense gratification, to get pleasure, immediate pleasure. And the brain wants to use it for higher thinking. So when it's used, when it's not dispelled from the body, then it goes up to the brain. That's the system of yoga, to gradually udvareta. Udvareta means reta is shukra, to raise it up to the brain so that one can think. It's like if someone practices brahmacharya his whole life, then it's supposed that he will be able to remember everything that he's heard from the spiritual master. Just like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and many others, the lifelong celibates, their brain so strong they can remember practically everything verbatim. You can read, this is a very very famous. For those of you who've studied in this field or anything, if you want to do some research, these are the pillars of our modern medical sciences. Okay, you can read about it.
Professor Charles Edward Brown Séquard, 1817 to 94, French physiologist, neurologist, and often considered to be the father of endocrinology, was born in Port Louis on the island of Mauritius, of American and French parentage. In 1846, at the age of 29, he graduated medical doctor from Paris and then practiced medicine in the United States, Britain, and France. In 1854, he returned to Mauritius, where he was presented with a gold medal by his countrymen for subduing a cholera epidemic there. He was appointed professor of the Institutes of Medicine and Medical Jurisprudence at the Virginia Medical College in Richmond, Virginia. Brown Séquard discovered that the voluntary suppression of the ejaculation of semen strengthens a man and is conducive to long life. This is due to the semen being thus returned to the body, which thus acts as a tonic for the nervous system.
This again is the same as the Ayurvedic system of brahmacharya. If you keep the vital fluid in the body, then it rises to the brain and the nervous system. So, in other words, this is exactly opposite of what's being taught today. They're teaching today that by expelling the vital fluid, that it's good for health. When the founders of the science said it's not good for health. So where did they come up with this spurious theories? You will find out in a few minutes from how it came out. Another very famous, highly regarded personality.
Richard Freiherr von Krafft-Ebing, 1840-1902, German neuropsychologist born in Mannheim, Baden, Germany, educated in Prague and studied medicine at the University of Heidelberg. He served as professor of psychiatry at the universities of Strasbourg, Graz, and Vienna between 1872 and 1902. He made early discoveries about such conditions as epilepsy and found a relationship between syphilis and general paralysis. Krafft-Ebing found that the nervous derangement, which was often the starting point of a mental derangement, had one primary cause: loss of prostatic and other seminal constituents through orgasms or involuntary seminal emissions.
This is very significant. In his studies, that those who had engaged in much sexual activities lost these different prostatic and other secretions from the body. So then they found that, and all of them found this, it's not just one, but they all, in their studies, they traced it back, that this is the cause. That, in fact, we even see that the disease of epilepsy, I was surprised to find out, but it's not a disease for pre-puberty, it only begins after puberty. It's linked to the development of this sexual tendency. And so many of the problems, the mental problems that we're facing in the world, especially like Alzheimer's, they say Alzheimer's disease will be tripled by the year 2050. They have no cure for it. So part part of it is our lifestyle. Lifestyle of illicit activity, sexual activity, then intoxication doesn't help the brain or the body. Meat eating doesn't help the body or the brain. So much anxiety. So many, in other words, we've created a society that produces its own diseases, and then they continue, and it gets worse and worse, and then we come up with more psychotropic drugs, powerful psychotropic drugs, to try to counteract the effects, and they create side effects, and oh boy, and we become completely lost in an unnatural chemical system. So we're trying to point this out. Of course, the Vedas have been pointing it out, but by showing that even our fathers of the Western medicine understood this, we can see that starting around 1900, as you'll see, things started changing. Up till then, before that time, there was a strong consensus in conjunction with the Vedas. Okay, now we're going to look at a few celibate geniuses. This is in the, can you see it? It's pretty small, but you can read it.
Elia, also known as Eliyahu or Elias, 927 to 850 before Christ, often considered the loftiest prophet of the Old Testament. He is especially known for his successful contest at Mount Carmel. Elia learned at Mount Oreb that Elisha, also known as Eliseus, was selected by God to be his own, Elias' successor. Elia found Elisha working to the plow with oxygen and made him his disciple.
Oxy.
Found Elisha working the plow with oxen and made him his disciple. Elisha inherited the wonder-working power of Elia. Elia and Elisha were celibate all their lives.
This is significant because in the Jewish tradition, they generally don't recommend celibacy. And they think that it's not recommended in the Bible, but here, great prophets were chosen to do that because they could work for God more concentratedly without dispelling their energy. Next.
John the Baptist, between 8 and 4 before Christ, about 27 after death of Christ.
Well, everyone's heard of, at least in the Christian world, they've heard of John the Baptist. He was also celibate throughout his life. Next. Can you read that?
But the fact that John the Baptist probably lived a celibate life and that in the community of his disciples it was held in high esteem would support the supposition that Mary's choice of virginity belonged to this new cultural and religious context. Pope John Paul II.
Yes, in other words, celibacy was there in Judaism, it was there in Christianity, it's certainly there in all Vedic culture. It's not something forbidden or discouraged, but it may be overlooked now as being valuable, and it may be difficult to perform now because of the values of society have changed. But just like Prabhupada came and introduced brahmacharya system, he came to the West. What a place to come, where everything was going the other direction. And he introduced brahmacharya in the West, and it was accepted. Because brahmacharya, just by itself, rejection of sense gratification, there has to be something positive to replace that. Where do you get the pleasure? There has to be some pleasure. pleasure has to come from within, spiritual pleasure. Then one can forego the temporary bodily pleasure. Jesus Christ was celibate. Next.
Jesus Christ. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Jesus Christ. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery.
Okay, next. Now, so these are lifelong celibates. Michelangelo, the famous artist and sculptor. Okay, next.
Michelangelo consistently reaffirmed his conviction to remain celibate. The master artisan simply had more passion for art and for the care of his father and brothers than he did for sexual adventure.
Next. Newton was a lifelong celibate. Like mathematician, scientist, everyone knows Sir Isaac Newton.
Greek leaves it to the reader to imagine any connection between his abandonment and Newton's inability to form a warm attachment to anybody during his long, solitary and celibate life. Just prior to Newton's death, he told his servant that he was proud that he had remained celibate throughout his life.
Well, the reason we're pointing this out is that we see that the number of geniuses that are celibate seems to be more than, in other words, there's some relationship between controlling the sex urge and keeping the vital fluid and the nourishment of the brain and being able to use it wonderfully. Handel, the great composer. Next.
His sociable instincts were not very strong, whence it comes, no doubt, that he was a celibate all his life. It is asserted that he never had any dealings with women.
Next. Kant, the great philosopher. Go ahead.
For what it is worth, Kant was a lifelong celibate, whose knowledge of sexual fulfillment must have been primarily theoretical.
Next. Okay, now we're back to the scientists again. Spitzka is very famous, very big scientist. Okay, what does he say?
Spitzka presented case studies in which masturbation caused insanity. He claimed this is primarily due to arrested brain nutrition, which results from the withdrawal from the circulation of brain-nourishing lecithin and other phosphorus compounds through excessive seminal discharge.
These things are vital to the brain nourishment, so they're lost in this way by improper usage. And then when they're lost in the brain, then insanity, because insanity means the brain's not nourished. Go on.
Spitzka, that a connection between the development of the mind and the male genitals exists is indisputable. Even if we assume that the defective development of the genital system found in brain monstrosities, idiots, imbeciles, original monomaniacs, and the periodically insane is an accidental accompaniment of the neural maldevelopment, we must admit the convincing proof that the early extirpation, removal of the testicles, as in eunuchs and castrated animals, exerts an influence on the mental complexion and development.
Well, these are not just quacks. These are the great stalwarts in the field whose teachings are studied by all those in their particular fields. So we can't overlook them, but they've been overlooked. It's all been hidden by the modern, and now we'll find out the villain. The villain has arrived. Freud.
Freud attributed neurasthenia neurosis to immoderate masturbation or spontaneous.
Okay, we'll get more on Freud later. Continue. This is the one, yeah. Okay, next.
Ellis noted that
Next one after this. Yeah, this is it.
Avalok Ellis. The brain and the sexual organs are the great rivals in using up bodily energy, and there is an antagonism between brain vigor and extreme sexual vigor, even though they may sometimes appear at different periods in the same individual.
Yeah, this is the quote that's so relevant, that they're rivals for this. Okay, go ahead. Another stalwart scientist, endocrinologist. Next. Steinach.
Steiner's research showed that testes and ovaries secrete hormones into the bloodstream that influence not only physical development but also sexual behavior.
Next one.
Steinach has performed experiments which definitely show that the internal secretions of the sex glands, after being resorbed into the circulation, pass principally to the brain and spinal cord, wherein they are stored.
That's where they're supposed to be. But when there's sexual activity, they're dispelled from the body, and so they're taken from the brain and spinal cord, therefore nervous disorders. Now, it's true that the semen has another function of carrying the soul into the body, and it's got all this amazing, it acts as a seed, and it's got all the blueprints or the DNA or RNA or whatever you want to call it, the code for the body of a offspring. So it's an amazing thing. It serves many functions, but what's not being understood is the functions that it serves in the body. But they knew it, and of course the Vedas knew it, but today they don't know it. They think it's just worthless, so they just waste it.
Steinach concluded that the primary action of the internal secretion of the sex glands after passing into the blood is upon the central nervous system.
Next. Okay, now we're getting to Freud. Now we'll go on next. Next. Well, we skipped one part. Freud is I